So for my second choice topic, I wanted to focus on the difficult side of learning. And so I started to look into different types of learning disabilities, different struggles that people might face. And so I learned that learning disabilities are neurological disorders, and so the difference in the this is a different it's a difference in the way that the person's brain is wired, is what it said. And so it actually said that children with learning disabilities are as smart or smarter than their peers. And so these learning disabilities can interfere with, just learning basic skills like reading, writing, math, just struggles with basic needs in school. And they can also interfere with higher levels skills such as planning, organization, abstract reasoning, and they can even affect, long term and short term memory and attention. And so this impacts learning as well as personal relationships. So, people who are poor with planning or organization, stuff like that, don't tend to do well in school. And so I focused on the different types. And so the first one I learned about was auditory processing disorders, or called APD. And this affects how sound travels unimpeded through the ear and how it's processed and interpreted by the brain. So I found it interesting. I looked up the statistics of, how many people have this, and it says that it actually affects 5% of school-age children. And so with this, kids don't recognize subtle differences between sounds and words. And so it gave an example of bear as an animal or bear skin. And so we can tell the difference based on how we say in the sentence, or what words are used with it in the sentence. And then it says that they can find it difficult to tell where the sound is coming from. The second one, and I know I'm going to butcher this word, is dyscalculia. And this affects a person's ability to understand numbers and learn math facts. And so they struggle with memorizing and organizing numbers. They have a difficult time telling time, and they have trouble with counting. And this affects up to 7% of students. And then there's dysgraphia. And so this affects how a person's handwriting, it affects their handwriting abilities and their fine motor skills. And so it says that problems that with this would include, illegible handwriting, inconsistent spacing, poor spelling, and difficulty composing writing. And so this affects 5 to 20% of people. And then finally, and this one's pretty well known. I didn't know about the first three, honestly, but I did know about dyslexia. And so this affects reading and related language-based skills. And so it can affect reading, fluency, decoding, reading comprehension, recall, and spelling, referred to as a language-based learning disability. And so this affects 5 to 17% of the U.S. population. And so I guess my final thoughts, I definitely learned something new with this topic. Like I said, I wasn't aware of all the different types of disabilities, difficulties people can have with learning. I did not realize that there was so many different kinds of disabilities that affect people, but are less noticeable, is what I was thinking. And so my favorite thing I learned was actually that the people with, learning disabilities have average or above average intelligence. And so kind of wrapping it up, I think that this is, definitely interesting and should be taken into account. I think back to, I was actually in first grade and I got held back in first grade. I couldn't read, and it wasn't that I couldn't read. It was more so that I just had a really hard time kind of comprehending what I was reading, and was just really nervous and didn't like to read out loud. And so I was lucky enough to have my teacher notice that and kind of held me back and helped me through the next year. I could only imagine if they would have, pushed me on into second grade at that time. kind of how that would have affected me. I feel like I would have always been behind on reading anyway. And so, yeah, I definitely think that definitely need to take, learning disabilities into account when it comes to kind of figuring out how people learn and all that different kind of stuff. So